Hi, Simon.
Hi there, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, yeah, sorry, I've been trying to join for like 10 minutes, but for some reason I couldn't, it wouldn't accept me for some
No
reason. So
worries.
I'm
No,
sorry I'm a bit late.
don't worry. We just extended the Q&A from the previous session, so I think we were all right. Thank
Good.
you for joining us. I think everybody's
Absolute pleasure.
here, so we don't need to wait to start your session.
Mhm.
Why don't I quickly introduce you, if you don't mind?
Of course.
So, Simon is a serial entrepreneur, if I may say. He's also an angel investor, motivational speaker, as you can probably tell from his current setting, a podcast host, and also a mentor. He started 17 businesses and invested over 65, mentored hundreds of founders. So I think he's really the guy to have in this competition. So we're very lucky to have you. I'll leave the floor to you to introduce yourself further and to start your talk. So yeah, I hope everybody enjoys. I'm very much looking forward to this.
Well, thank you first of all for having me. It's always an honor to be able to share your story and have people want to listen. So hopefully I make it worth everyone's time. I think my aim for my kind of opening, I guess, introduction is I've already been, you've already talked about who I am, but I thought I would try and answer what is the purpose of life. I know it's a small thing to try and achieve, but maybe help you guys understand what the purpose of life is. I think I've also figured out the secret to it all when it comes to being successful in business, which is pretty arrogant to say. I left school at 15 with near zero education and started my own first business at 15 years old. And I retired at 40. Now, retired in this day and age perhaps doesn't mean what it used to be. Retirement for me means that I just do whatever I want every single day. And so if I want to come on and talk to you guys, I can. If I want to go for a walk with my dogs, I can. If I want to invest in a business that I like, I can. So I retired at 40 with that premise. Now, I want you guys to keep in mind, I have a question for you to think about as I kind of tell you a little story. And I want you guys to think about whether or not you're lucky or not. Are you lucky? And so with that in mind, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about how I got where I am today. Now, I think for the first 15 years of my career, so from the age of 15 to 30, I was just trying to figure out who I was. And if I'm being honest about it, I just wanted to pay my bills. I just wanted to be able to eat. Certainly in the first 5 years of building a business, the thing I always thought about was not purpose or my why, all these things you hear about today, but was just, can I afford to put food on the table? And I had 5 days where I didn't do that when I was 15 years old. I didn't eat for 5 days. Now, officially, you can die if you don't have water for 3 days. So luckily, I was living in England at that time and water was free. And so I didn't die. You can probably tell I'm here now talking to you. But I did learn a few valuable lessons through that process that a lot of people have lofty insights and stories and they'll stand on a pedestal telling you how to do things. But I think context and environment often do require people to focus in on what matters. And in my case, in my early career, it was literally just surviving. So I was kicked out of home by my mother at 15. And it was just one of those examples of like having to survive. Now, there is a whole TED talk that I've done. Well, I think it's supposed to say TEDx. It's a TEDx talk, not a TED talk. So one level down from a TED talk. So I've done a TEDx talk, which is all about what happened to me. So you guys can go and watch that. And so I won't necessarily repeat it, although I'll give you a little glimpse of what I talk about in that talk. And in that talk, I literally try to explain how I have figured out this concept of the purpose of life and the secret to it all. And I think I really started to realize the answer to these questions when I was in my 30s. And I started to have quite a lot of success in my own personal businesses, enough success that I was able to start investing in other people's businesses. Now, I love risk. I actually think risk is a very important part of being successful. But even as someone that loves risk, I like to take calculated risks. And so when I started investing in startups, I spent quite a lot of time understanding who made it and who didn't as far as startups are concerned. I wanted to understand why why some businesses flew and became Microsoft or Google, and why some became Kodak and failed. And so I spent a lot of time studying the founders of these companies. And, for example, I often quote Bill Gates. His story is well known. He left Harvard and started Microsoft. But at the time, he rarely talks about it, but there are a few bits and pieces out there that indicate this is what happened to him. When he quit Harvard, everybody in his network said to him he was mad. And the theory was, don't quit Harvard, finish Harvard. Do this little software fun thing on the side and stay at Harvard. Because, of course, if you stay at Harvard and you get to the other end of it, then you're set for life, which I think there's depending on your view of what set for life is, there's some truth to it. But he didn't. And he went full time on the thing that he loved. And of course, we all know what happened. He became the richest man on the planet. You could argue built a good company or not, depending on your viewpoint, but certainly made a difference in the world, up there with Steve Jobs and others. And certainly he's not a name you're going to forget in the next 100 years. So, but he did drop out of Harvard and take that chance. Equally, if you start drilling down into all these founders, you look at people like Elon Musk, similar story. He in fact, going further into the businesses that they've gone into themselves. I mean, Elon Musk knew nothing about space or space travel personally. So a lot of people would give you advice, he went into space, he doesn't know anything about it. And he just hired people that know something about it. So there's the whole premise that, C students end up hiring A students because A students can do the things that they need them to do. But A students very rarely hire C students. So Elon Musk then goes out and has a vision to do things like, of course, Tesla and so on. But of course, someone like Elon Musk is also a good example. And I'm not actually endorsing Elon Musk. I'm still jury out whether he's a good person or not in my mind. But certainly his entrepreneurial journey is a fascinating one. And he was one of the founders of PayPal. He made $110 million from selling PayPal. And, you could argue at that point, why not just sit back, buy yourself a few properties, take the rent income from it and just enjoy the rest of your life partying. And so why did he almost go broke again? And he did almost go broke. He was quoted, I think, 6 or 7 years after PayPal, having started things like Tesla and so on, that he was almost broke and living on a friend's couch to save rent. And so, why did he take that chance? And today, if the founder of PayPal had come on and wanted to talk today, you certainly would have all listened. If I told you I'd made 110 million from my last business, I made a little bit less than that selling my last company, Fluid, to PwC. But he would be seen as a success, and no need to take all these chances. So why did he take a chance? Why did he do Tesla and all these other projects? And frankly, when you start looking at all these founders, all these businesses, this theme goes on and on. I talk about it in my TEDx talk. And the takeaway I had from it was the one common theme that all these entrepreneurs have that are successful is that they're willing to risk it all. Even brands like Google, who could just sit on their nest egg of search, take that money and put it into things like cars that drive themselves, all the risks that involves, and all these other projects that are very risky. And that's why they're still up there as one of the most successful companies in the world right now, because they keep taking chances and they never count what they've got. They just look at what they want to achieve. And so this willing to risk it all, in my view, is a huge part of the secret to it all. So many people don't want to risk what they've got. And so that's why quite often you look back at people like Tyson, who, again, I'm not endorsing as a boxer or fighter, a very famous boxer and fighter from a couple of decades ago. He came from the street. He learned to fight in the street. And it's that difficult environment that made him one of the world's most feared and successful fighters in the ring. And so from that adversity can come incredible strength, and weakness can come from counting what you've got and holding on to it too tight. And I have my own personal story around this. My family were very rich when I was growing up. I didn't know it at the time when I was a kid. I just noticed we had a bigger house than other people, more cars than other people, but I didn't actually really grasp as a kid that we were rich, but we were. And then when I was around 15 years old, there was a financial crisis in England and my family lost all their money. And so Oh, by the way, we're in lockdown in London, as you guys know. So I'm actually doing this podcast from home, and my dogs are here, so there's a chance they'll bark. It's not me barking, it's them, just so you know. But I basically have this experience where my family lost everything, and my father, who was 56 at the time, went from, you know, in Cambridge where we grew up, well-respected businessman, and having done some amazing things in business, to bankrupt in a large way. And the stress of that example meant that my father, at 56 years old, died of a heart attack. And so at 15 years old, I suddenly lost my father, and then I fell out with my mother, and she kicked me out of home. And these two difficult moments meant a completely different life for me. That my parents had always said to me they wanted me to be a lawyer. They'd even picked out, you know, what universities I had to go to be the best lawyer. And so my path was pretty set in their minds. And so suddenly this life change where I was kicked out of home, I was living in awful, I'm going to call it a squat, but my wife says I'm not allowed to call it that because it had curtains. So I lived in this awful little squat. and basically I sat there and thought to myself, who am I? Who am I really? Am I a lawyer? This is what I've been taught I am going to be. But actually, am I? And then, long story short, I sat there for 2 days. So it's a short story, and a few seconds instead of 2 days worth of insight. And I realized, you know what? I'm just going to start something for myself. I'm going to become independent. I'm going to be self-sufficient. You know, part of it was I wanted to prove my mum, you know, wasn't going to control me, and I could be free, and I wasn't going to go back begging for her forgiveness or whatever. And I also wanted to prove that I could do something on my own. So I started a business. So I literally saw where I was living that the houses around me, some of them were quite nice and their gardens weren't well taken care of. And I literally just went over to the house with a mess's garden, knocked on the door of that house and said, hey, I noticed your garden's messy. I've got a gardening company and I'd like to take care of it. And to my shock, they said yes. I knocked on 10 houses that day. 8 of them said yes. Before I knew it, I had a gardening company. And so, again, TEDx talk, we'll talk a bit about this. So I won't go into the ins and outs. But long story short, it took me 7 years from that point to really become a success in business. And while all my friends were at university and having a good time partying, I was struggling to learn cash flow and learn how to hire people and learn how to do agreements in business and buy equipment when you don't have the money and all of these things in a real life, real time way. So when all my friends came out of university, I could hire them all. And I often say that my father, in a way, gave me a gift when he left. He gave me the ability to fail. All the peer pressure, all the things that were expected of me just fell away, and suddenly it didn't mean anything. And I could just do something, and if it didn't work, it didn't matter. I could learn from it and do it again and eventually get good at it. And so this willingness to fail is the same as risking it all, but it equals success. And then I retired and I learned something new. I learned, first of all, it's not natural for a young person to retire. The second thing I learned was I sat down to write a book about how brilliant I was and how I'd done all these things that I just partly explained to you, and how I managed to build up these big companies and from nothing with no money and turn them into businesses that people like PwC, the accounts company, wanted to buy. And when I was younger, there was no way PwC would have hired me because I didn't have the education. But when they bought my company, they wanted me to work for them. You know, and so it was an interesting dynamic change where, you know, you basically go from, I guess, an uneducated person who's seen as, you know, an entrepreneur, so can't get a job, to someone that they desperately want in their organization as a change maker and innovator and so on. So I sat down to write a book about it. And as I wrote out the book, the words came quite easily to me, to be honest. I just told stories about what had happened to me, and I think it's a pretty interesting book. And then I reread it to myself, and I realized there was something missing from the book. An ingredient that I feel like is missing from almost every single, let's call it self-help guru, business guru book. And it's this element that I realized when I pinpointed exact moments when I made, let's say, lots of money. And that element that made me really successful, this ingredient wasn't in the book. And I wanted to include it. And that ingredient was luck. I was lucky. Now, you can argue I wasn't born lucky, and you can argue that at certain points in my life, I certainly wouldn't be perceived as lucky. But actually, I am. And then I got a bit obsessed with luck, because I wanted to explain it, not just as, oh, I was lucky, you know, and people go, oh, no, you weren't. You worked hard. You know, you had a good idea and you took risk, and all of these things are true. But there was just that intangible piece that I know a lot of people that work hard. I know a lot of people that had a good idea, and I know a lot of people that are broke right now and don't have the time to jump on it now and share their insights with you, because you'd be like, well, they haven't made it, so what have they got to share? And so I got obsessed with luck, and I started looking at things in history that are kind of interesting. I was looking at a story about, this is a true story, about 4 boys who were playing on rocks on the 6th of August, 1945. And they were having a chat amongst themselves, because below the rocks was this lake. It was a fairly shallow lake, but it was, you know, it was a big jump if you jet left from the rocks down into the lake. And these boys have been teasing each other for years about jumping and, you know, overcoming the fear of jumping into the lake from the rocks that they were playing on. And then this particular day, one boy said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take that risk. And the other 3 boys, and again, this is a true story, the other 3 boys saying, well, be careful, you know, if you jump and you hit the rocks, you know, be careful. I don't want to be awful if something happened. And then when you fall in the water, we all know how shallow it is down there. So, you know, it's like, I've got to do it. I've got to overcome my fear. And so this one boy jumps off the rocks, lands in the water. And as the other 3 boys are watching him land in the water, the first of the nuclear bombs to hit Japan hit Hiroshima, 6th of August, 1945. At the exact moment that boy hit the water. The 3 boys not in the water, over the next 2 weeks, died of radiation poisoning. The boy in the water survived. Now, that might sound strange, but the truth is the nuclear bombs in the early years were not that powerful. There's even joke clips around, you know, how there was between the Cold War, Russia and America, there was these videos produced in America saying, you know, if a nuclear bomb hit, duck and cover, which was basically now a joke, where it's basically saying, go under cover, go under your desk or go in a bathtub, and, you know, it will help you survive any nuclear attack from Russia, so don't worry, sort of thing. And actually there was some truth. There was a study done after the first bomb was dropped, and a lot of people had survived if they were in a bathtub, or, as this boy was, they were underwater, because the nuclear bombs weren't that powerful at that point. So if you're outside the drop zone and outside the main radiation point, and the radiation swept past you, if you were actually under the water, there was a high chance you would survive. So this boy did survive, but his 3 friends died. And the lesson is that everybody that day, those 4 boys discussing, the risky one, the one who shouldn't take the risk, was the boy who jumped, but he took that chance and went for it, and he lived on. The other 3 perceived staying on the rock as the place to be, and that was the safe bet. You wouldn't get hurt if you didn't jump. You would survive. They were wrong. Now, of course, you could argue that he was lucky that he hit the water at the right time and that he took that jump at that right time. And then we start looking at history, and there's plenty of stories like this. You know, there's the stories of, I was just listening to Benjamin Adels, who's one of the survivors of the Second World War. He's age 95 now. He's in the Royal Air Force. And he talks about D-Day and kind of watching how, you know, some people survived and some people didn't that day as they jumped onto the beach, and how random it all was. And, you know, you can be smart, you can be prepared, you can be well trained, but you're still the one that's killed as soon as you step off the boat. And then there's the story again of, you know, one man who survived both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear attacks, a man by the name of Yamachuchi. He basically is the only man registered to have survived the nuclear attack and been in both places. Now, you can argue how unlucky as a person can you be to have actually been in both locations when the nuclear bomb went off. So when it went off in Hiroshima, he then went to Nagasaki, and then it went off, another bomb went off there. So, you know, how unlucky was he to be in both locations, yet he was lucky enough to survive. So in conclusion, I wrote this kind of little thing up, which I quite like, which is, fear is an asset, luck is a skill, passion is a must-have, and purpose is your fuel. that's my insights, folks. I'm now opening it to the floor for any questions anyone might have.
I think I'm a bit speechless. That was unbelievable, unbelievable, really. I think I speak for everybody in the room. Yeah, let's definitely open up to questions. I think if people can gather their mind and come up with questions even. Let's see.
Kara,
Equally, I can keep talking, by the way.
we can have them answer with raising their hands.
Yep. Are there any hands? Someone says that was an amazing talk. I think we can agree. Somebody asks, do you trust your gut feeling or trust your logic?
I totally trust my gut feeling. I mean, gut feeling basically is also something you need to train, but gut feeling really comes from not asking other people what they think, but asking your internal self what you think. Too many people look for validation externally. And I basically have spent probably the early part of my life just asking myself internally, is this the right decision, which has built up my gut instinctability. But logic can actually talk you out of it. And most enterprises are not logical. Most businesses, most ventures, if you actually follow it through to the nth degree, don't make any sense. So, for example, I'm doing a podcast show right now. If you actually research it, there's 750,000 podcasts right now. So why start another one? What difference are you really making? You know, if you go too logical about it, as opposed to just going internally and saying, I know that there's people out there that need help to start a business. I'm going to help them. I know there's a lot of people unemployed that should be starting a business, not looking for a job. I'm going to help them. You know, and then that you start from that. Let's call it emotional, irrational, passion perspective. Then yeah, that's my answer. Definitely gut instinct.
So Bahar has asked, how can we increase the chance of being lucky in our life?
That's a really good question, and there's actually a lot of stuff out there on this. And so, you know, part of it is I've osmosis. I've read how other people have put it, but this is my view. I think luck really is there's two types of luck. First of all, the dictionary is out of date. The dictionary only really defines luck as random, and that there is a random luck. Let's call it a lottery winner for the sake of argument. But you know, there is random luck. But there is also a second luck which needs to be included in the dictionary. I'm on a mission to include it. And I think that luck is controllable. And I think there's three elements in my view that control luck. The first, as I've kind of mentioned a little bit in this talk, is around building up your risk muscle. Risk is actually like anything else. You've got to keep pushing the boundaries and taking risk, you know, starting something that feels uncomfortable. I'd even go as far as to say, I think fear is an asset. It's actually a skill. Fear as an instinct was given to us as a tool of an asset. For some reason, when people feel fear, they think they need to get rid of that fear feeling as quickly as possible. But actually, it's designed to drive you. It's designed to get you through something difficult. It's an asset. So I love it when I feel fear, and fear and risk are highly correlated. But it's interesting in human psychology, because if you say to someone, you know, in marketing, and I'm a big marketing person. If you say to someone, you know, you can save £1 by using my service, or you say, did you know it costs you £1 to not use my service? The second one really gets people. People hate the idea of, you know, risk and loss, but saving £1 is kind of, I'm okay right now. You know, but the fear of losing something is so much stronger. So that fear, learning to enjoy fear, embrace it, really builds up your luck opportunities. I think the second element of being more lucky is persistence. So I mentor a lot of founders of companies, and I say to them, your job role is not CEO or whatever you want to give yourself. Your job title is really persistence. And a lot of talented people in this world do not make it a lot because they're not persistent. And I love sales, and to a lot of people, sales is a dirty word, but I see sales as a lifeline to building companies. I love sales, and I think sales is very positive if you do it in an honest, open way. But I always follow this kind of like 20 rules of sales, which is basically most people, the average time that someone tries to sell someone else something is 3 times before they give up. They didn't reply to my email, I sent it 3 times. They didn't reply to my phone call, I left them 3 messages. 3 is the average time people give up. Mine's 20, and even then, I don't really give up. And so, you know, that persistence, and I think having a strong purpose, and one of my favorite speakers is a guy called Simon Sinek, and he talks about why, your why. I think having purpose or your why helps with persistence. So whenever I've sold something, I don't keep selling them as in bothering them. And I sell them it because I know they need it. And once they understand what we're actually offering, it's going to make their lives better. It's going to make their businesses stronger. So I don't mind keep bothering them, because I know eventually when they do use the service, they're going to turn around to me and say, Simon, thank you for, you know, keep pestering me about this. Now my life's better. So that purpose and why has to come in for persistence to really feel pure and not just overdoing it. And then the final thing to increase your luck. I'm sorry if I'm going a bit too long on this question of how do you get lucky, but I've spent a lot of time on it, so I've got a lot of thoughts on it. But I think the final piece for me is having a clear destination. So, you know, you've got to have one, in my view. And most people don't make it clear what they actually want. They might start a business, for example, but they don't actually know what success would look like. So they just kind of go with it, and they don't set a very clear path. So, for example, with my podcast, what I'm saying is I would like to help 10% of the world's unemployed start a business of their own. That's my aim. So, you know, having a destination. I interviewed in one of my previous podcasts, episode 5, I think, a very interesting guy called Hugo Tafar, who invented the whole medical discipline. Anyway, long story short, he created this concept of manifestation. So basically, his theory was that luck was manifested. You basically, whatever you ask for, you'll get it. It might not be in the form that you expect it to be in. So, you know, it's not always delivered in the way you would like it to be delivered, but the lessons or the experiences or what you're after can be manifested. And if you have the wrong thoughts, the negative thoughts, those things will also happen. So be very clear what you're asking for and what you want, I think is, in my view, the third element to this non-random luck definition of luck.
So next question. Personal qualities you think have helped you succeed. So what are your personal qualities you think have helped you succeed? For example, why did you move naturally to entrepreneurship instead of taking a standard entry-level job when you started your gardening business?
I think adversity is the mother of innovation. So I actually now thank my mum for kicking me out of home at 15. I didn't at the time, of course, but now I have the perfect life. For me, I'm not saying it's perfect for everyone, but it's perfect for me. And I feel like I wouldn't have that life if I hadn't had the adversity in the early days. And I think that, you know, I like this idea that, you know, good luck can sometimes be bad luck and bad luck can sometimes be good luck. I think it's also a matter of perspective. But to answer your question, I took the entrepreneurial path because no one would give me a job. Certainly not worthy of what I thought my intellect was. So, you know, I did do part-time jobs. I did, you know, worked as a waiter. I worked in a shop. I did all these things, but, you know, I just wasn't intellectually stimulated in these environments. And so I knew that I wasn't going to get a job at PwC. And so I didn't have the education for it. So that was wonderful, though, which is probably not the best environment to be sharing that necessarily. I mean, I do think sometimes it's back to my point earlier that you can have a great education, but sometimes you have to also ignore it. Don't make it who you are. You know, leverage it to support what you want to do. That's the difference. So I don't say, you know, even my son who's 2.5, you know, he started talking about what his daddy does, you know, and like for me, like, I think it's more important, like, what problem are you solving, not what job are you going to do? So that you know, being an entrepreneur for me, it was the only way to survive and have, but now as an entrepreneur, I just couldn't work for anybody else. To me, working for someone else is more risky than working for myself, because I'm giving someone else control over my life. If I work for someone else, it sounds like it's less risky. But actually, in reality, like, you look, I was just speaking to someone yesterday. I'm hiring someone right now to help me with some of my projects. And, you know, they were just laid off, and they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant at their job, but they were laid off. you know, so they're not in control of their own destiny. Whereas I know I've had times in my life where, you know, my businesses have failed, but I'm in control of that. You know, I can work harder and make them survive, or I can raise money, or I can cut costs, or yeah, I close it down, but I'm in control. Whereas I feel like when you're employed, you're incredibly, you know, and this comes from my own parents. My father was an entrepreneur, but before that he worked for someone else. And one day, after 15 years of working for them, they just let him go. And I didn't want that for my life. And I think that drove me into entrepreneurship, because I feel like, you know, I then went and learned, like becoming a doctor. No one's born a doctor. No one's born a lawyer. You know, like entrepreneurs are definitely people that are taught. But I think adversity helps entrepreneurs, because it's like scarcity of resources means that you have to find a way to survive. So I learned to sell because I had to, because if I didn't convince those people to let me take care of their gardens, then I wouldn't have any income and I wouldn't eat. That will make you become an entrepreneur, and a good one. So yeah.
There's a really interesting question. So taking risk means that there's a possibility of failing, of getting hurt, of getting others hurt. I'm sure you know all of these things. So how does that side of risk factor into the logic of being prone to risk? How does the logic then change when other people are dependent on you?
It is a good question. And I think it's actually more than one question. And I would break it into two parts. The first part would be, you know, why take risk? And my view is, you know, life is short and you've got to take risk. I do think without risk, no one is successful. Risk is definitely a key element of being lucky. And if you don't take a chance, then there's no chance of winning. I mean, there's the old lottery line in the UK, you know, you've got to be in it to win it, right? Such a clever little point. And I think that's true for life. You know, if you don't take some risks, then and I meet a lot of people that don't take risks and they're in jobs they hate in their 40s instead of free like me. And that's because they didn't take any risks. And ironically, that lack of risk later will come back to hurt you much more than the risk you should have taken when you were younger. And I think the second part, in my view, is more about taking responsibility for others. And, you know, I have been very conscious in my career of the risks that I'm taking are putting people's jobs in jeopardy. But let's be blunt about it. Every capitalistic business on the planet does that. So every time a bank lends money or leverages the money it's got in the bank, it's putting all its staff in that bank at, you know, jobs at risk. And so that's the nature of it. The truth is just the difference in my view is whether people see it or don't. So it kind of goes back to reinforcing my first point, which is you've got to work for yourself, because the only people that can really know what risks are being taken are the owners of the business. So if you're not the owner of the business, or at least a shareholder in that business or involved in top level alignment, then you are taking a risk. You have to be, you know, a lot of employers, and I employ people, so, you know, I want to be a little bit careful, but I don't think working for people is a very good idea. Because at the end of the day, I like to think I'm a good boss, and I'm a kind person. I genuinely think that, and that's arrogant of me to say maybe, but I don't want to hurt anybody. But if my business is in trouble and we're all going to go under, then I will have to cut 10% of my workforce. It's not personal, it's just business, right? But who's that 10%? Is it going to be you? Who's it going to be? And so if you're not in control of that, I think it's a problem in your life. And so many people spend 20 years working for someone else and they go, sorry, you know, we have to close down, see ya. You know, and so, but that being said, I mean, I've tried different models. I've had 17 companies and I tried different models. So I have tried a model, for example, where I put the cash flow on the wall and said, this is where we're at. This is, you know, this month, this is what we're doing. And if we don't make it, you know, we don't get new business in this month, or we don't collect this money from this client. So, you know, the accounts team, you need to work hard, and sales team, you need to work hard. If we don't, then we don't make cash flow at the end of the month. We can't pay the salaries. You know, and you could argue that's being a transparent employer, because then now you know what's going on. You know what the risks are in the company you're working for. I mean, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I don't know what age group you guys are all here, but Enron staff, I bet they never saw it coming. You know, you're working at Enron, you've got stock on paper, you're worth hundreds of thousands of US dollars, and then suddenly stupid mistake by Enron folks, the whole thing collapses. You will lose your job. You know, and so ironically, the owners of that business, the senior people, they made money. And so, you know, and to me anyway, I mean, money aside, it's really about being in control of your own destiny. I say to people that come to work for me, only come to work for me if my mission and my vision appeals to you. Otherwise, do something for yourself, or go work for someone who has got a mission that you care about. Because that's what really matters. You know, if you get laid off, but you worked on something for 20 years where it mattered, then it doesn't matter. If you work for some corporation and you've got softer and softer working for that corporation and got used to the easy life, and you've got mortgages based on the income that they were providing to you monthly to control the system, then you know you're setting yourself up, I think, for a harder life later.
Mm-hmm. So we have a few more questions. I don't know how much time you have, Simon. I can keep going. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I've got time.
Perfect. So I was wondering this as well, actually. Rodrigo asked, when did you have most fear and how did you overcome it?
Well, interestingly enough, I think, of course, it's quite difficult to answer that. Over a career, I've had fear at many different moments. So, for example, I had a very large company and I was living in Hong Kong in 2003. I had a business called Fluid, and talk about a lot of responsibility, a lot of people working for me. And then coronavirus 1.0 hit the city. So we had SARS virus hit, which is the original coronavirus. So I've actually seen exactly what's happening right now. I've seen it all before. And I think at that time, I'd never experienced, you know, you always look at like, okay, you know, the business may suffer because of a housing bubble or this problem or that problem, but I'd never seen a virus hit the economy before and then suddenly everyone freeze and stop everything. And that's kind of what happened. So I built this business up. I had my reputation tied to it. And, you know, I felt fear in that moment. But because by that point, I built up my fear tolerance, I quickly turned it into an opportunity. And so, you know, as people were laying off staff in my industry, I had a creative agency, I started hiring them. And my feeling was, yeah, I felt fear, but I felt fear in a positive way. You know, to me, I love fear. Now, on a micro level, I have felt fear when I first did public speaking, maybe in my 30s. I remember going on stage. Now, I've been on stage speaking to thousands of people before, and I feel fear. Even today, I have an element of fear to me about it, but I use it. I don't hide away from it. I don't think, oh, I feel fearful about that, and oh, I better stop. You know, I leverage it. I pull on it. It drives me. It's an asset. It's designed to help us go further, faster, fight. You know, and so fear to me now is something I crave, you know, and that's one thing I've missed when I retired, and that's why I'm back in work. I miss that fear feeling. It's exciting, but to most people it's daunting, and it's because they don't do it enough.
Very inspiring. I think I speak for everybody. Let's have one last question, Simon. So at 15, adversity gave you a burning hunger. When your son turns 15, hopefully he won't know what going hungry for 5 days feels like. How does he drive himself the same way you drove yourself? Is adversity a necessary prerequisite to hunger? Hunger, I think, in a soul kind of way, not in a physical way.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is discovering what your purpose is in life. It's not an easy answer, and it takes time to evolve, I think, your purpose. But I think now I have hunger based on my purpose. I'm certainly not. That is my son, by the way. He is very tired, everybody. And I feel like, you know, passion now and purpose drives hunger. You know, when I know I can help the unemployed out there right now that might be suffering just from sharing knowledge through a video. You know, I can make a video which is fun to make and I can share it on YouTube for free, and that might help people, then why don't I do it? You know, so that drives me now, and that could be a big driver. You don't need to have gone through what I went through. So when talking about my son, it actually gave me goose pimples, by the way, for some reason, that question about that, because there is an element of this that is very tricky. I adore my son, and I absolutely would not want him to necessarily have the pain that I had. But that being said, I do think there is an important element in this, which is to listen to what he wants and let him develop who he is, as opposed to me developing him. So I always say that my son teaches me something every day. I don't teach him much. All I teach him is love. So I hug him when he wants. And people always say when a baby cries, let them cry out. I've never done that. He wants a hug. He's got it, man. Easiest thing in the world for me to do. He cries, I let him out. That's why I find it very hard to hire a nanny, because most nannies are like, let him cry out. I'm like, well, why not pick him up and hug him? He's 6 months old and he's crying, man. Just pick him up and hug him. It's because you're lazy. You don't want to do it. You'd rather he just went to sleep, but then you can go on your phone, right? So for me, I try to be very unselfish and not make him me, not tell him what I think. In fact, I ask him what he thinks all the time, even to the point where I say, what do you want to do today? And he says, I want to stay in. I'm like, okay, you can stay in. What do you want to do? You want to go to the park? All right, let's go to the park. What does he want? Not what I want. Not, I want you to go to nursery today, because that will be really convenient for me, because then I can go do what I want to do all day. So that's the technique I'm applying. Come back to me in 13 years' time, and I'll let you know if it's working or whether he's turned into a complete nightmare.
Well,
so far, so good. It's quite cute.
13 years. I think it'll be fascinating to hear you speak again at that point too. I think this quite perfectly concludes this talk. Simon, thank you so much for your time. I think everybody's kind of messaging in this chat box saying it was brilliant, amazing talk. Thank you so much. I completely agree. I think that was really fascinating. I don't know what else to say. Really, really thank you from the bottom of my heart. That was really inspiring. And I hope people can take snippets of that and apply it even in this competition, but definitely for, the rest of their lives, definitely. And so I advise everybody to go check out the Good Luck Club podcast as well. And yeah, thank you so much, Simon. If you have any final words.
If anyone wants to connect to me, you can go. I have a YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Simon Squibb. You can also connect through my website, simonsquibb.com. And if anybody out there wants to start a business and wants some help, I go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, helping people for free start businesses equally. If you know someone that needs some help, I'm here to help people right now.
Amazing. I'll make sure to share that in our networks and group chats.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming, Simon, and I hope you have a lovely rest of the day.
Likewise. See you soon.
Bye. Thank you. Whew. Wow. That gave me chills at points. Sorry for my commentary. I'm reading really good presentations this morning. Thank you a lot. I thought that was fantastic, and I'm really glad that you guys enjoyed it as well.